Hey there, and welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide Podcast. I'm Austin
And I'm Brooke.
from Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast track to compliance, but today we're here to give you all the secrets for free. So if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Today, we've got Bo Birdwell from Elbit Systems of America joining us. Bo brings the prime contractor perspective to the conversation. A lot of our listeners are small and mid-sized companies in the defense supply chain, aerospace manufacturers, machine shops, subcontractors, who are trying to understand what companies like Elbit are actually expecting from their suppliers when it comes to cybersecurity and CMMC. So today, we're going to talk about how primes are thinking about CMMC, what they're looking for in suppliers, the common mistakes they see across the supply chain, and what small businesses can do right now to demonstrate progress. Bo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Austin, for having me here. I do want to let the record be shown that today is St. Patrick's Day when we recorded this, and I am the only person on this call wearing green. May the record show that.
You know, I thought about that earlier. I was listening to the radio and they said something about that. I was like, I messed up on that.
Well, you're the redhead, so if anyone looks Irish on this call, it's you. You can't. If Brooke was red, that ship has sailed. But
It has, hasn't it?
dude, it's good to talk to y'all. And yes, I'm very happy to represent the perspective of a company that's we're about a $1.7 billion annual revenue. Our parent company is somewhere over 10 billion. For their annual revenue. That we're very proud of some of the stuff we do to defend this country, such as we're a big part of the night vision devices capabilities for this country. We're one of the major suppliers for those. We're a big supplier of the JHNX, the Joint Telemounted Queuing System. We do some important things for bombs, and then outside the Department of War, we actually do a lot of stuff for the Customs and Border Protection, as far as the wall security. And as one thing we're also proud of, the reason that it's called Golden Dome is because our company owns the term Iron Dome. So there's a trademark.
That's
so
awesome.
we're actually the ones that are the Iron Dome, and we're actually hoping to be part of the Golden Dome initiative. I'm hoping we can address any questions y'all have that might help align some suppliers to better prepare themselves for. I know the elephant in the room that I think everybody is aware of by this point is CMMC, and maybe hopefully we can crush any CMMC flat earthers out there to hopefully help them see that it's not a fringe science thing. It's real.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it, Bo, and appreciate you joining us. I think this will be really valuable for everyone listening. Do you mind starting off by kind of introducing yourself, your role at Elbit, and then how your role involves working with suppliers and how that ties in with cybersecurity, aka NIST and
Absolutely.
CMMC.
I started working at Elbit back in October of 2018. I started in engineering, where I stood up what became a cyber engineering directorate. And then in 2020, I moved over to the corporate side to be the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer, to help prepare us for CMMC. We spent 5 years getting ready for CMMC because we had the time. So we had the luxury of time, right? Because one of the truths in IT or truths in business is a truth for a reason. Fast, good, and cheap. You can choose to. Well, we took by doing it over 5 years, we were able to maybe look at options that aren't quite available to those that are trying to do it in 5 months. Right, we had the opportunity to learn from our mistakes. One of the things that, as from the Deputy CISO perspective, I helped with a lot of the documentation. We got a lot of positive feedback from both DoD DIPCAC auditors, and I've been through 3 of those, 2 highs and a medium, and 2 CMMC assessments. Not because we failed any of them, but because we have a subsidiary that has their own network. And in all of those cases, they were very positive toward our documentation, because we were able to show not only did we have procedures, not only we have processes, we iterated them. And it kind of points to that maturity of actually your ink's not wet. And those are some things I was able to do there. And then one of the things we were able to do, because we had, a little more time than maybe some companies have right now, not a whole lot, but last summer when we got our house in order, we really started looking externally at our supply base and realized that from a supply chain perspective, we really didn't have a good understanding of the cybersecurity compliance of our suppliers. So the company made a decision to move me over from being the deputy CISO to being a director of supply chain business excellence. And my initial task, hopefully to end, by Christmas of this year, is to normalize CMMC compliance within our supply chain processes. And we've made a lot of headway in the last 6 months, and we're seeing real progress. We're one of the more vocal companies out there. If you look on our website, we put out 3 letters in the last 4 months. There'll be another letter coming out probably in April, maybe later this month, but definitely in the next 45 days. We try to keep our suppliers aware of what we're doing, and we're really proud of the fact that when we ask for people to reach out to us that are level 2 compliant, we take that seriously, and we've gotten good feedback from that. We've had over a dozen companies that are level 2 compliant today reach out to us that we didn't have a business relationship with, and they wanting to make sure that they're on our Rolodex. And as we're fleshing out our Rolodex, they absolutely are part of it. And that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I will evolve to other things in the future, but right now, a big portion of what I do is I'm the company's CMMC project officer. Anything CMMC related, I work with the lawyers, I work with supply chain, I work with IT. I don't know all the DFAR clauses. Lawyers do that, but I'm pretty comfortable talking about most of the ones related to cybersecurity requirements from the defense side.
Appreciate that, Bo. Yeah, and this is a great segue. My next question is, how did you get into the defense industry and the side of the business? Your background a little bit.
I retired after 20 years of active duty service in the U.S. Air Force in 2016. I had the opportunity there to work with every airframe in the first half of my career, and then I transitioned more towards cyber. And the second half of the last 10 years of my career, where I was able to actually do full not only command on a squadron that did the whole range of cyber operations, but actually help to orchestrate the cyber operations, both, not just talking about, bad guy stuff, but also, defending your networks for the entire Air Force in the last couple of years of my career. So I actually had I don't know, like most people have a lot of happy memories in the military. I know the older I get, the better I was, and it's been 10 years. So like the stories now are, the fish is really big, but that's what I did for 20 years of my life. And then for the last 10 years, 8 of which I've been at Elbit. And then before that, I did a couple different things, and I'm really excited about securing our data, because again, my background in the military tells me this is a real threat, and not that that's a secret anymore. That's pretty common knowledge now that the nation states are in your networks. Criminal actors are trying to break your network so they can get money. Cyber is real. I've had some great opportunities to really mature risk management and address from a cyber perspective. That's one of our something that we actually get a lot of positive feedback for. We actually have done a pretty decent job of translating cyber risk into monetary figures. And for that, it's gotten some credibility with our leadership and with outside parties, including major primes. And I define those as the big six.
Absolutely. Thank you. And over your career, you started in the military, and you've developed into your role at Elbit. How have you seen the cybersecurity expectations evolve in the defense supply chain over your tenure?
I think there was a lot of thrashing in 2017 when I think I'm sure y'all are aware of this. What became CMMC, the DFARS requirement started in 2013. They went live, or 2012, and they went live in December of 2017. And at that point, there was, I would say, real consternation, but people were saying, okay, did anybody get decapitated? No. And they made conscious risk decisions that several companies, not necessarily by size, but I would say a significant portion of companies made decisions to defer costs and not realizing that they would be deferring costs for such a long period of time that it became almost overwhelming tech debt, right? By the time that the people have to make a decision. And I think, unfortunately, because the rulemaking process took a long period of time and it transitioned between administrations, that there is some people out there that became CMMC flat earthers. And what I mean by that is they really just don't believe the earth is round. They think CMMC is going to go away. They think it's a joke. And I don't know how to talk to them because I have contract requirements that have CMMC in them today. And I'm not talking about just level 1 self-attestations. I'm talking level 2 see-through PAO. So that it's not hypothetical. It's not over the horizon. It's here today. And that is something I think many companies are still struggling with. And I'm personally predicting that there is going to be a sea change in many companies' attitudes towards CMMC because people are going to, in the next 6 months, are going to start seeing business opportunities fall away from them. So that's me going on a limb, looking in my crystal ball, however you want to say it. I think there's people on this call are going to hear a business opportunity dry up or not follow through because there's going to be someone who's not going to select them because they've made a risk decision, which is fine. We're all adults, but just realize, you made a risk decision. I think that's going to be something that you'll see in the next 6 months. And I think that's how you'll see it evolve. As companies actually see opportunity costs hit them, they're much more likely to make strong action statements, and you'll actually see people trying to get CMMC compliant in single-digit months versus single-digit years.
That brings up my next question. It's a great segue. So you mentioned the CMMC flat earthers, basically the people that have seen the requirements, transition from, NIST to the different CMMC versions, go on. And for some of them, it still feels like something that isn't real, isn't happening. And to me, it feels like they've missed that inflection point, from, things like at what point has it started becoming real? From your just opinion or perspective, at what point did the supply chain cybersecurity really start becoming, what was that inflection point that this really started to matter?
We put in one of our open letters that 31 days into the phase 1, we got our first level 2 requirement. And I think a senior leader in our company put it pretty well. That was quick. We've had senior leaders conversations well above me, getting our arms around where's the health of our supply chain, because no one builds anything without a supply chain. I don't care who you are. And I just think people need to be very confident that this is not that they can play chicken with those above them in the chain, because this is not something where the company above you is prime, or what do you want to call the higher tier supplier, because maybe in some cases we're not the prime, we're sub, but we're still higher than our supply base. We'll have, if there's an option between a company that is certified and a company that's not, I don't think a lot of companies will be struggling in that decision. And I think that's going to be happening more often in the next 6 months than people expect, because they think they have 6 or 7 more months until November. But I'm just saying, not everybody on the DoD side is, on the contracting officer side, is holding off and putting those clauses in there.
So it's already passed that inflection point,
I think each company will find that inflection point. I'm saying that was our inflection point, but I'm saying for the people listening on this call, that inflection point is probably going to happen to you in the next 6 months, where someone's going to ask you that question. And depending on your answer, you might not get another phone call. And I think that's going to happen a lot in the next 6 months and definitely in the next 12. But I think those, to use your term, the inflection point, I think most companies are going to have that moment. Yeah.
So, question related to that, Bo. So, a company misses that inflection point, for instance, and they know they got to get on the ball and get things done, and so down the road, later this year, at the end of the year, whatever it may be, they get their level 2 certification. Now they're all good to go. What do they do at that point? Have they missed the bus?
I I hesitate to ever say someone's missed the bus. I will say you probably missed a PO, but I mean, but as far as you're being done, I don't know of anyone that would say that you're done. I think what happens then is it's like standing in line for 3 hours for a ticket, and then you decide, oh man, I gotta go to the bathroom or something, whatever. And no one's gonna let you go back in line where you were. You had a great place in line. Maybe you waited 18 hours. I don't know. And then you had a strong bladder. But then at some point you decided I have to cut out a line, but Billy's gonna keep my place. I put it unlikely that Billy is going to keep the place. So what's going to happen is you might actually fall back a lot further in line. So maybe you were, and this is a generic hypothetical. I would say that it's possible that you might find that you're now put in the same Rolodex with any other company, as opposed to being, dude, we had a relationship for 20 years, and I invited you to my Christmas party. It's going to be, you're in the same boat as the other guys that are good now, because the inflection point is past where you had the opportunity to smoothly move forward. And I would just encourage people, take it seriously and be careful that there are wolves out there in sheep's clothing. Make sure you know who helps you.
Well, appreciate that. That's people always ask us, the reason I ask that question is because we get asked those kinds of things, and I like your standing in line for tickets comparison. That's a good one. But it's that makes sense that, if they've had that relationship and everything, these past 20 years has been, just have that ongoing relationship and POs and contracts coming your way. Then if you're not ready when the time comes, you gotta get back at the end of the line and get back in. So I appreciate that perspective.
You might be stealing that one, if I'm going to be honest. So,
well, I think we are still on that.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, it's a really good analogy. I think that a lot of the companies we work for and a lot of the audience on our channel, they're small and mid-sized companies in the defense supply chain. They're not direct by any means, to the government. So, they're just kind of hearing all of this from, through the grapevine. It might feel
Well, a lot
like
of it's
to
from
them.
the ecosystem, right? A lot of
Yep.
it's coming from the ecosystem, and they feel that those are people that have less than best intentions at heart, right? And that's why I try to do these podcasts, because, dude, I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm trying to buy stuff. And if you don't believe me, I don't know what I can tell you, dude. I mean, I work in supply chain for a defense industrial based company, and I'm trying to build out our supply chain. So when I come on these podcasts, it's specifically to say, I'm not coming here with an agenda. I'm not saying I have a 7-step process to make you good. And I sure as hell ain't saying that I can get you through an assessment in 11 minutes, but what I am saying is they're not joking. And when you look at those 800 companies that are level 2 today, little fun fact, the cyber AV doesn't know who they are. The DoD hasn't told any of us who they are. They just give the cyber AV a number. And I've talked to several of those companies, and most of them are people that are primes to some extent, because the prime doesn't mean that you're, $100 billion company. Prime just means you have a prime contract with the government. And most people that have a prime relationship with the government know this is coming. So that is, I think, part of the issue. And then what I've seen is many primes are hesitant to get ahead of the government. So there is some where you're basically seeing most of us are just echoing what's already in literature. Like when we put on our open letter that we cannot issue a PO unless you're compliant with the requirement, That's not something I wrote or Copilot wrote or, Grok or whoever. That's literally straight out of the DFARS clause. It explicitly says we cannot do that. So I think maybe it's because we've read the clauses, and that's all. I'm not trying to say people don't read clauses, but I do know a lot of people maybe don't think their government's serious. And I would just warn them that I wouldn't play chicken with this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's that brings up the next thing that I was going to ask you about is that because they're so far down the supply chain or removed from the main customer, the government, or the intention of CMMC can get a little lost along the way, and the goal of primes or of their customers like you get a little lost as well. So if you could for a minute just kind of go over what is the purpose of CMMC, why is it important, and what risks are companies like you, primes, and et cetera, trying to manage when they're pushing cybersecurity down to their supply chain?
That's a great question. And I think where a lot of people struggle, especially from the prime perspective, is how far down your supply base does controlled unclassified information flow? The answer is federal contract information flows really far. But every prime I've talked to tries to limit the flow of controlled unclassified information because the prime is responsible for it as far down as it goes down the supply chain, not just to their first tier suppliers. One of the terms that my lawyer friends taught me is privity of contract. The government has said that is a prime problem because the DoD has said, we don't have privity of contract, which just means we don't have a contractual relationship with your suppliers. And as much as I would like to say, well, pot kettle, we don't have a relationship with our suppliers either. Like, hello, we have the same problem that by accepting the contract from the government, we are obligated to figure out how to do that. And there are several ways we can do that. We partnered with ExoStar, and that is one way. That's not the only way. Some of the other primes I know have built their own databases. Generally, those are companies a lot bigger than us, because anybody that thinks it's easy to manage your own database that you're going to be showing on it's a lot of work. And so a lot of us just outsource. As you would know that since you are a managed service provider. But the question about what do we care about is where is the data? And the government absolutely wants to make sure that we know where that data is and that it's meeting adequate protection, right? Which anyone that's been following this, to go back to one of your earlier questions, that's verbiage is from 7012. That rule has been around for a long. Adequate security is not a CMMC thing. All CMMC does, which I know I'm not the first person to say this, is it's external validation that you're providing adequate security. And water's wet, sky is blue. That's what CMMC is about, is just trust but verify. That's all CMMC is. The government's big concern is validating adequate security. And unfortunately, there's been plenty of public record comments, all that kind of stuff, that show that maybe not everybody takes adequate security to mean the same thing, or their understanding of how 7012 applied to them. Katie Arrington on multiple occasions had talked about the companies that put POAMs that would end sometime in 2099 because that's what they were allowed to do. So they would put for 110 controls POAM of December 31st, 2099. And they actually told that to the DoD. So we did this to ourselves, right? Because the DoD's initial plan was to just litmus test occasionally. And how do I say this? Had things gone differently that did CACA medium assessments in 2020, or in 2019, if things hadn't gone the way they did with the report, maybe we wouldn't have CMMC today. But you get what you pay for, so that's where we're at.
No, I appreciate that. You'd mentioned, you're in the supply chain, you're just trying to buy stuff, right? And find suppliers. So from your vantage point, how prepared do you see or think that the supply chain is today, and are most suppliers still earlier in their journey?
I will say the answer is define the supply base, right? Because no one knows how big the DIB is, defense industrial base. We're because of that whole privity of contract, no one really knows how big things get. But in general, I would say the closer you are to the government customer, you're more likely to be further along the journey. The further you are from the government customer, you're more likely to be further away. And I've had, I won't say heated conversations, but I have had strong conversations about how long it takes to go from 0 to 60 to get compliant. I personally think unless you're breaking a lot of stuff and basically shutting down production servers during normal working hours, you're looking at a 9 to 18-month process because holidays don't happen that often. So if you're going to actually do some of this stuff, generally you try to do it on a holiday because some places they work weekends. So it's not like, I mean, very few places have budgeted in to shut down all their servers, whatever, to get them upgraded, to putting FIPS compliant. I mean, I was able to do it over years because I had years to do it. Now, I think doing that in 5 months, it means you're going to be impacting production and you might not be able to meet your contractual obligations because you have to produce so many widgets every month. And it's going to be hard to do that when IT is having to make major changes. So I would offer the closer you are to the government, the more likely you are that you're further along in the journey. But even those that are further along in the journey are still early in the journey with their supply chains, because I think most people up to this point have done it serially. And now we're losing that ability. Companies can no longer handle it serially because when you have it come up in a contract, it's now you've got to figure out in parallel, who are you sharing that information with and how do you go downhill? It'll be interesting to see how this works out over the next 18 months if the government starts pulling the thread on show me, all the places where federal contract information is. You're telling me there's only 2 companies in your supply chain? How far do they actually pull that? Because federal contract information is almost everywhere. So that technically you should be having a lot of companies getting federal contract information, because unless it's completely a COTS communication or it's, something that's straight out of what was put out on sam.gov when they announced E1, it's federal contract information. So that's going to be, I think, a friction point as we go forward is how far down the rabbit hole do those Excel spreadsheets actually go where you're supposed to be listing out the UIDs, unique identifiers for each of your suppliers that gets either federal contract information or controlled and classified information.
Absolutely. And so kind of, take this from another angle for a minute and kind of, what I was wanting to ask you is, when a supplier wants to work with a company like Elbit, what does a good cybersecurity posture look like? What do you look for in a supplier? What signals tell you a supplier's taking this seriously?
I will tell you, there's nothing anyone can tell me because I've been lied to by so many people. I've had conversation with vendors whose product is FedRAMP, but and then when I pull the thread, it was built in government Azure. That's not FedRAMP, brother. I have that conversation at least once a month with a vendor. With the suppliers, oh yeah, we're level 2, and then can I see your paperwork? No, so that like our ExoStar forms that we push out, we only push them to companies that show that they're at least level 1. If they're not level 1 today, there's not a whole lot of communication that's happening. That we're looking at. We see a demand signal for everyone should be level 1 by now. And everyone that if you're building something to print, building something to form, you really need to be getting pretty closer to level 2, because if you're building something to spec, it's going to be very likely that that's going to be controlled and classified information. Now, if you own the intellectual property, maybe it's like it's your stuff, and maybe those are conversations that are different. But if you are building something for a higher tier supplier that is not, something that you sell at Walmart, or you can't go buy it at Sam's, Lowe's, whoever, there's a risk there that it's going to require level 2. And if all you're doing is building something to the mill deck like mill standard or something, that's where that's where the lawyers get involved. Is that really tailored? And, and those are conversations that I think are going to be interesting for the next 6 to 12 months as we normalize. But I guarantee if you're building something that's not a standard product, there's going to be controlled unclassified information in your future.
I think you might have already mentioned this, but I'm going to ask it just in case. What are some red flags when you see when evaluating suppliers?
Sometimes I'll just ask them if they're using Office, to show me their Office, and it's like, hey, that's the commercial version of Microsoft. You guys are at least 6 months out, if not more, because it is not an easy lift to switch from commercial to tenant to GCC high. So that's one thing I'll ask. I'll ask, what cloud services do you use? I'll ask, tell me about FIPS. Yeah, I don't know. One thing I haven't mentioned up to this point is I'm actually a certified lead certified CMMC assessor. I think that's what lead CCA stands for. Yeah, I'm actually a lead CCA because I went through enough audits for CMMC, for DIPCAC, for ISO 27001, and I had their certifications. I was actually able to get the lead. I was one of the first lead CCAs. There's me and a couple other primes where the lead guy is the lead person. Yeah, I think they're all guys though. The lead person is a lead CCA.
That's good. That's a big thing too.
Yeah, I get a lot of people wanting to hire me to be a CCA, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm doing the implementation. I'm good.
Got your plate full.
I literally do.
What are some of the most common misconceptions you see from your suppliers and what they have about CMMC?
I think some people think that they have more leverage than they do. That they're like, oh, this isn't real. It's not going to happen. And I've got plenty of time. That's a common misperception. Because we have production requirements, right? Like when we're going to have to, one thing that I think is also an odd thing that's going on right now, some stuff's showing up much later in the process than you expect. Not everything's showing up at the beginning of the RFP. It might come in 30 days before, it's done, or it might even show up in award, which, yes, you can pick your battles and say, hey, that wasn't in there and it wasn't in scope. Maybe we'll argue, but maybe you won't, because it's much more complicated than just one factor. Very few things in life are black and white. There's always, 5 or 6 factors you have to consider. And I think organizations think they have more runway than they do. And they think they have more leverage in a relationship than they do. And that goes for primes too with the government. You got to be real careful going to the DoD customer saying, yeah, you need me. I think there's a real risk there where they might be saying, maybe not. So you have to be real careful because it's real money and it's people's jobs.
Yeah, I think, oftentimes people get caught up a little much in the trees and not the forest. So they'll, look very, detailed and narrow at the requirements or the problems facing them today. And they won't necessarily see the changing tide, in the bigger picture. And I think, just my personal perspective, as you're talking, I see that a lot in our customers and our prospects and the people we talk to, that they're just not seeing the bigger picture here. And I think some people may be missing the boat, if you will. So
I think I've also said a lot of life is self-critiquing. So, I think we're within 6 months of people getting some pretty clear feedback. If not, more power to them. And we'll see what happens, but I feel pretty confident that in the next 6 months, there's going to be more emphasis on this. I'm willing to publicly state I don't think CMMC is going to get turned off in November. So I think some contracts are going to go to the they do have a safety valve. It's called in the clause, it specifically says in phase 2 and phase 3, they can push the CMMC requirements to the option period. I think that's going to be used judiciously, because the DoD is not going to shoot themselves in the foot. If it's something that they absolutely need to have, they probably will play that card. But if it's a new capability or something where there's options available and it's not, okay, this is the only one you can use. This is what I think that more often than not, you're going to see judicious and minimal use of the safety valve for CMMC in 2027.
Good point. Good point. I do have a question. You've talked a lot about flowdown and your supply, making sure your suppliers are ready. So for companies that are trying, smaller companies that are trying to do that, what should they be doing to try to make sure that they're how do they build that database? Do they just ask the question? They say, do you promise?
Well, no, one thing you can do is if what you're producing is, you can do a determination statement that it's commercial off-the-shelf technology. That is your gold card, right? That's your gold ticket. So that's in the control of the supplier. The supplier is the one that provides that to the customer. Is you? I think you know that. So that's the best thing that is. If you really think you're a COTS product, the DoD has a definition of what COTS is. There's a process you go through. Make sure that you can prove what you're producing is COTS. That's your best defense. And then one of the things I think we'll work through in the next 12 months is there's actually a thing called military off-the-shelf technology. I'd never heard of MOTS, but now that I'm in supply chain, I've now heard of MOTS. I just don't think there's you go to Sam's and get grenades. I don't know, but it's like military off the shelf, right? It's such a thing, and we're going to find out what does that mean. Is that FCI? Is that CUI? Is that
right?
Is it a form of COTS? I think that's going to be something that'll normalize over the next 12 months. I think the best thing you can do is understand where you are in the food chain. If you're COTS, you're really protected. If you're just building someone else's stuff at their specifications, I would say you're at higher risk than someone who all they do is they build special widgets that they own the intellectual property for that is critical for X products. I would highly encourage them to be level 1, but maybe they can play roulette and hope that they don't, things don't go too south for them, right? Even in Russian roulette, it's supposed to be a 5 out of 6 odds as long as you don't just keep pulling the trigger. So so it depends on the game and what the rules are, but you're playing with fire.
Mm-hmm. So for these clients that are level 2 or these subs that are level 2 or going to be level 2 soon, they're asking, how do they do the same, verify the same for their suppliers that maybe, finish the product?
Always, it's data flow. Yeah, absolutely. It goes to data flow. What are you sharing with who? Mm-hmm. And I think the one that everybody's going to be struggling with is just the level 1, because there's still a paperwork requirement. You have to still validate for level 1. And I think that's the one that's maybe slipping through the cracks. It's not going to be a big crusher because I think people can get there, but it's going to be an impediment. It's going to be a hill you have to climb over, because that information, it's going to be really hard to stop, where there are things you can do to limit control on classified information. There's not a whole lot you can do about federal contract information. I mean, it's pretty, I won't say it's everywhere, but it's pretty heavily influenced to be a big portion of the contract information.
Gotcha.
Well, last question I had for you today, Bo, is if you could give advice to a supplier who says, I know I need to do something, but I have no idea where to start, what advice would you give them?
It's great. A great question. First thing I tell them for our suppliers, I actually have some stuff I share with them that gives them a roadmap or a flight plan, depending on how you want to look at it. First thing I tell them to do is look at the US DoD, Department of War websites, like the CMMC page under the CIO, the CMMC page under DCSA, Cyber AB. These are places where no one's trying to sell you anything. This is just hard data. Next thing I tell them to do is to seriously consider investing about under $2,000 to put someone through a CCP class, because someone in your company needs to be able to speak the language. Even when you're going to outsource a lot, I'm a big believer that you need someone that can speak truth to leadership in your company and actually understand what is in the realm of the possible and also what's in the realm of required versus nice to do. So I always recommend that. And the last thing I recommend is go to conferences. I know y'all are going to a conference tomorrow, so it'll be done before this thing goes live. But there is a big conference in San Diego in next month in April. It's the CS5 West. I think October will be CS5 East. And then there's a thing called CUI Con. They call it CUI Con, but it's CUI. And that was in February every year. So there's a couple of options out there for people to go to. Those are low cost, and there's plenty of people at those conferences that want to help you. You can just go walk the floor. And those are I'd say 4 or 5 things to start off with. I tried to recommend to any supplier because I do get asked a lot, how do I get from 0 to 60?
Well, Bo, really appreciate your time and information today. It's been really helpful. I think it's going to be really helpful to our listeners who catch it whenever it airs. So thank you. If you have questions about what we covered, please reach out to us. We're here to help fast track your compliance journey. Text, email, or call in your questions, and we'll answer them for free here on the podcast. You can find our contact information at CMMC Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant, stay secure, and make sure to subscribe.